Hello, good day. My name is Carson White and I'm representing Freshers Tech. We just keeping it fresh like the air you breathe in the morning. Always fresh. And I'm here to speak about the project we have just did on the File Fixer application. The members of my team are Casey Mentor, Alexis, Shane Bihari, we have Rajiv Sada, and of course, you know my name, Carson White. The problem or solution we had to find was for university. We had to deal with the files that were uploaded by students, which were assignments that were named incorrectly and not conforming to convention. The files are uploaded to My eLearning, which is the learning platform of the university's choice. And the files are uploaded, which they are placed into My eLearning's initial convention on download. Those files are downloaded by the teacher, and when the lecturer has to re-upload them, they need to be in a specific format to be uploaded to My eLearning. So our job was to create a solution to rename those files into this format. One of the main issues you would have with that is not all students would name their files correctly. So some may just have a name or missing a couple IDs or may not have particular things. But due to that, there's a CSV provided which would have all that information. So our job was to find a way to use that CSV to rename these files. Now, that brings us to one of our major use cases, which was renaming files. Now, to rename a file, the files will be placed into a particular folder in the Maven project. Once the project is run, all the files within that folder will be read, and the names will be searched by ID, participant ID to be exact, user ID, and also by name, and in that order. If a file doesn't have a participant ID and it cannot be matched using the participant ID in the CSV, we'll go on to use the student ID and so on and so forth until we reach name. That is then matched against the CSV, and if the name is there, we now rename the file following the particular convention. That would be a successful case. A failure case would be a case where the file doesn't have any major identifier on which we can rename the file by, such as there's no name, there's no ID of any sort, so it just might be the course name, and in that case we will have a failure. That puts us on to our second use case, is creating a list of missing files. Because after doing all of the renaming of files, there will be a certain amount of students that will be in the CSV, and this CSV, as I said before, is all the names of the students we expect the assignment from. Now, if we cannot match against any of these, as we match, we remove names from the record and place into a new one for those that were matched. The remaining names in the records would be those names that did not submit any assignment. That is then placed into a file in which someone can manually look at them and see if that matches up with any of the other PDFs that were not renamed. Successful case would be that all the files, all the names that are left in the record are files that were not submitted. A failure case would be some of the names in the record were renamed and submitted. Yes, were renamed and submitted, but yet were still in the record. And our third case would be reading zip files. Zip files are needed to be read, so if sometimes you would get, instead of a whole folder that's a whole unzip folder, you would get a zip folder. In this case, the files would need to be unzipped and once unzipped, all PDF files and the CSV files will be used as normal to perform the operation stated previously. Now, this would be successful once the file is unzipped and we have one CSV file and one to multiple PDF files that can be renamed. It should be noted that there should only be one CSV file. If there are multiple CSV files, that would give us a failure, as we only need one CSV file which would have all the names in it. If there's no CSV file, we'll also have a failure, because we will need a CSV file to match against the PDF files within that same folder. So thank you so much. I will now hand over to Rajiv Sadhu, who would take us through the testing in this program.
Hello, my name is Rajiv Sadhu, and we'll be going over the unit testing of FileFixer. So how do we conduct unit testing? Well, it's done with assert J and JUnit. Now, because it's a Maven project, we just need to include the dependencies here in the POM file. Assert J provides better assertions, with improved functionality over the standard JUnit ones. Now let's run all of our tests. We need to move into the project roots, and because this is a Maven project, all we need to do is run mvn test. Now this builds and runs all our tests. As we can see here, they all pass. Each of these tests correspond to our class that we have above here. Now let's look at some tests. Let's start with a simple one. Read from directory without CSV. So read a CSV, finds a CSV file, and reads it row by row to produce records, which are then compared with file names to see if they match. Now this is a very simple test. We just make the reader inside here, and then we call the method with the required parameter, which is a string path to a directory. Now this produces a file, which should be a single CSV file. In this case, since there is no CSV file in the directory, it will return null, which is what we're testing here. Assert that file is null. Let's move on to something a little more complicated. This is a parameterized test with a CSV source. So how does this work? Well, every time getPDFName is run, it will take a row of this as input. So first it'll run with this, then this, then this as the file name. Now getPDFName is a very simple method. It just returns the name of the file instead of the full file path. So yeah, we make a file with the file name and the directory it's in, the full part of the directory. We turn that into a file and then into a PDF. And now we assert that PDF.extracting. So PDF.getName, so it calls the function, the method getName from PDF, and we're testing if that's equal to the file name, which is what we get from here. And it should be, because we only want the file name in the end. Now for a much more complicated one, let's look at ZipReader. So ZipReader uses a lot of helper functions in order to work properly. So we have before each. So this runs before each test is run, right? So we're copying a zip from a stored directory here into test files, because we don't want to keep making one over and over again, although it could be done, right? And yeah, so we have a couple other helper functions here. So deleting a directory and all the files within, and just getting a file list. After each test is called, it will clear all the files inside test file. It will also recreate rename files, since that gets deleted as well. So let's look at one of these methods, one of these tests here. So we have unzip file and the zip exists. So this is very straightforward. We have a new zip reader, right? We call the unzip method, and provide it with a test directory. So this should unzip the zip file and place all of the files inside within the same directory as the zip file. The zip file isn't deleted in the process. And the zip file is there because the for each will have moved it there. Right, now we get a list of all the files in this directory. So we're trying to see if all the files got extracted properly. And we assert that the files contain exactly in any order, which means that it needs to have all of these, but it doesn't necessarily need to be in this particular order. And then it'll check these one by one to make sure that they are all inside files here. And we can see this passes because VS Code helpfully provides a little check mark here. We can also rerun this manually, like so, within VS Code. And yeah, it passed. Or rerun it here. And they will pass. So this has been a light preview into the unit testing that has been conducted for FileFixer. Thank you.
And we back. This has been the presentation from Fresh as Tech. Fresh like orange juice you drink in the morning, fresh like the air you breathe in the mountains. And we thank you for listening to us. This has been our presentation on the FileFixer app. Keep it fresh.